Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Streamline English. I hope you are having a peaceful day. Find a soft, quiet place and let yourself settle. Breathe in slowly and gently out. Tonight's story is a gentle and nuanced one, a story about a real person who was, for a long time, remembered only as a symbol, not a human being. You don't need to understand every word. Just listen and let the story unfold. Most people have heard the name Marie Antoinette. And most people, if they know anything about her, think of her as a symbol of selfishness. A queen who spent her people's money on shoes and parties and diamonds while her country suffered. A queen so out of touch with ordinary life that, according to the most famous story, when she was told that the poor people of France had no bread to eat, she replied, "Well then, let them eat cake." It is a perfect villain's line, and history has used it to paint her as one of the great symbols of royal indifference and excess. But here is the thing. Most historians today believe she almost certainly never said it. The quote was likely invented or wrongly attached to her as part of the wave of anger and propaganda that swept through France during the Revolution. And when you look more carefully at her life, the whole of it, not just the caricature, you find something more human, more complicated, and in many ways, more sad. Who was the real Marie Antoinette? Was she a careless villain, or a young woman thrown into an impossible situation who was used as a scapegoat for problems much larger than herself? Her name was Marie Antoinette, and this is her story. If you enjoy learning English through nuanced, true stories like this, please subscribe to Streamline English. It helps us keep these stories coming. Thank you, my friend. Our story begins in the year 1755 in the magnificent city of Vienna in the country of Austria. A girl was born into the great Habsburg royal family, one of the most powerful royal families in all of Europe. Her full name was Maria Antonia Josepha Johanna, but we know her as Marie Antoinette. She was one of 16 children of the Empress Maria Theresa, the ruler of the vast Habsburg domains, an extraordinary woman who governed a great empire while also raising a large family. Marie Antoinette's childhood, though privileged, was not without pressure. Her mother, Maud the Empress, was a demanding and formidable woman who expected her children to be useful to the family's political interests. In that time, royal children, especially royal daughters, were not raised simply to be happy. They were raised to be assets, to be married off to seal political alliances between nations. A princess was, in a cruel but practical sense, a political tool. Marie Antoinette grew up in the palaces of Vienna, surrounded by music, art, and the warmth of a large family. She was lively and charming, but not particularly academic. She loved music and dancing, and was said to be genuinely kind and warm by nature. But when she was 14 years old, still a child, really, her carefree life in Vienna came to an end. Her mother had arranged a marriage that would shape the destiny of both France and Austria. Marie Antoinette was to be sent to France to marry the heir to the French throne. She crossed the border between Austria and France on a May day in 1770. As she passed from one country to the other, she had to leave behind everything Austrian: her clothes, her pets, even her ladies-in-waiting. She was handed over, alone, to the French court. She was 14 years old, in a foreign country, speaking a foreign language, among strangers. she would never see her mother or her home country again. The French court to which Marie Antoinette was sent was one of the most magnificent and one of the most dangerous environments in Europe. The Palace of Versailles, just outside Paris, was a world of almost impossible grandeur and beauty. Vast gilded halls, formal gardens stretching to the horizon, thousands of courtiers and servants, and rituals so elaborate that even waking up in the morning was a ceremony. But underneath the glittering surface, the court of Versailles was a world of vicious gossip, political intrigue, and cruel judgment. Everyone watched everyone else. Intrigue means secret plotting and scheming. The court was full of people who whispered about others behind their backs, formed alliances, spread rumors, and worked to gain favor with the king. And everyone watched the young foreign girl who had arrived to be their future queen, looking for weaknesses, ready to mock or condemn. Marie Antoinette's husband-to-be was the future King Louis XVI. Their marriage was arranged, not chosen, and their relationship was, for a long time, distant and awkward. Louis was a shy, studious young man with little social grace. Marie Antoinette was lively and charming. They were, in many ways, quite different people, thrown together by politics. As she grew from a teenager into a young woman in this court, Marie Antoinette found ways to cope. She turned to pleasure, to beautiful clothes, to parties, to the gambling tables, to a close circle of friends whose company she enjoyed. She became famous across Europe for her fashion, which was elaborate and expensive. She had her own small palace, the Petit Trianon, where she could escape the crushing formality of the main court and relax among close friends. To her admirers, she was charming and stylish. To her critics, and they were many, she was a frivolous foreign queen squandering the resources of France. She was nicknamed, cruelly, Madame Deficit, as if the country's financial problems were her personal fault. In reality, France's deep financial crisis had been building for decades, long before Marie Antoinette arrived. But she made a convenient and visible target, and her spending, though genuinely excessive at times, was not the true cause of France's bankruptcy. Let me try to paint a fuller picture of who Marie Antoinette was, beyond the caricature. She was, by most accounts of those who knew her personally, genuinely kind and warm in private. She was generous to friends and to the poor people she encountered directly. When she finally had children, and it took many years, which was a great source of private sorrow and public mockery, she was a devoted and loving mother. She adored her children and spent as much time with them as the rigid court rules allowed. She was also brave. As the political situation in France deteriorated and revolution began to approach, she kept her composure under circumstances that would have broken many people. She tried, in the limited ways open to a queen consort, to understand the situation and to find solutions. She begged for mercy for her husband when it might have done some good. She showed grace and courage in situations of genuine terror. But she was also, genuinely, a woman of her time and class who had been raised to believe in the divine right of kings and the natural order of an aristocratic world. She did not understand, perhaps could not understand, the depth of suffering among the poor people of France. Her world was the court, and within the court, excess was normal, even expected. She was not a monster, but she was blind to a reality that was about to shatter her world. Being kind to the people you know does not always mean you see the suffering of those you've never met. That blindness, in any era, can have consequences. It is fair to say that Marie Antoinette's spending, especially in her early years as queen, was genuinely excessive, even by the standards of the lavish French court. She loved fashion obsessively. Her hairdresser created elaborate coiffures, hairstyles, that were sometimes so tall they had to be designed to fold down to fit through doorways. She spent enormous sums on gowns, diamonds, and jewelry her household was costly to maintain. Her parties and entertainments at Versailles were legendary for their extravagance. But here is the context her critics often left out. The French kings and queens had always lived in extraordinary luxury. It was considered part of the theater of power, the visible display of royal greatness. Louis XIV, the king who had built Versailles, had set the standard for royal extravagance a century before Marie Antoinette arrived. She inherited a system of royal expenditure, not invented it. The real causes of France's financial crisis in the 1780s were much deeper, a long series of expensive wars, including France's support for the American Revolution, an unfair tax system that burdened the poor but largely exempted the rich nobility, a growing national debt, and a series of failed harvests that caused genuine hunger among the ordinary people. But Marie Antoinette was vivid, foreign, female, and expensive. She was the perfect image of royal indulgence in an age of popular anger. The hatred and mockery aimed at her became vicious. Pamphlets full of cruel lies and sexual slanders were printed and spread throughout France. She became a symbol of everything that was wrong, even though the real sources of France's misery were more complex and widespread. In 1789, the French Revolution began. It was a great, violent, and historic upheaval. An upheaval is a sudden, dramatic, and often violent change that overturns the established order, in which the ordinary people of France rose up against the monarchy and the ruling class. The causes were many: hunger, inequality, debt, political frustration, and the powerful new ideas of liberty and equality that had been spreading through Europe. For Marie Antoinette and her family, the revolution meant danger, humiliation, and ultimately tragedy. The royal family was moved from Versailles to Paris under guard, essentially as prisoners. She watched as the world she had known disintegrated. She saw friends flee the country. She endured public humiliation and the constant fear of what might come next. She tried, and failed, to help organize an escape for the royal family. The attempt was caught, and the failure made their situation worse. The king and queen were tried, the king first, and found guilty of treason. Louis XVI was executed, put to death in January 1793. Marie Antoinette was imprisoned, separated from her children, and subjected to a show trial, a trial designed to look official but whose outcome was already decided, in which she was accused of crimes, some of which were deliberate fabrications. She was 37 years old. She had aged dramatically in her months of imprisonment. Her hair had turned white. But those who witnessed her at the trial noted that she carried herself with great dignity, calm, controlled, answering her accusers with quiet courage. On the 16th of October, 1793, Marie Antoinette was executed. The girl who had left Vienna at 14, who had never truly been allowed to simply be herself, who had been used as a political tool her whole life, was gone. The story of Marie Antoinette is not a simple one, and it should not be reduced to a simple verdict. She was not the pure villain of the revolutionary story, the cold, careless queen who didn't care about the suffering of her people. That story was, in large part, propaganda, a deliberately crafted image designed to make the revolution feel justified. The real person was more human, kind to those she knew, fond of her children, caught between the rigid world she had been raised in and a crisis she did not fully understand. But she was also genuinely blind, in important ways, to the suffering of ordinary people. She lived in a world of astonishing privilege, and she did not question it deeply enough. Her excessive spending, even if it wasn't the true cause of France's problems, showed a failure of imagination, a failure to truly understand what life was like for those who went hungry. What her story teaches us most powerfully is the cost of ignorance and of being shaped entirely by the world you are born into. She was not evil. She was, above all, a product of her environment, raised in a way that did not encourage her to look beyond her own golden walls. And that failure of vision, in the end, contributed to a tragedy that destroyed her world. It costs nothing to look beyond the world we know, to try to understand the lives of people very different from ourselves, and it can cost everything not to. So tonight, before you rest, a gentle thought. Marie Antoinette's story is, in part, a story about the limits of understanding, about what happens when we live entirely within one world and never truly see another. It is a very human tendency to see most clearly the people nearest to us, and to fail to truly imagine the lives of those far away. Learning a language is one of the most powerful tools for breaking through exactly that kind of barrier. When you learn English, you gain access to a vast world of voices, perspectives, and stories. Stories of people very different from yourself, people who see the world in different ways. Every story you understand in English is a small step beyond the golden walls of your own world, into the wider human family. Keep stepping beyond your walls, my friend. It is one of the most valuable journeys a person can make. If this story made you think, please give it a like and subscribe to Streamline English. It truly helps us grow. And tell me in the comments, was Marie Antoinette a villain or a victim, or something more complicated than either? Until next time, my friend, stay curious, stay kind, and have a wonderful day.